Hi everyone, it's Anne. Welcome back to Art on the Creek. We are in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and today I have a treat for you. It's May, it's a beautiful day, it's a Sunday when I'm filming this, so I thought we could go down to our local farmer's market. Parker blocks off Main Street every Sunday, starting in May, and it goes through the end of the growing season. So let's go down there and check and see what they've got. I bet we can find some pretty flowers to paint. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Sun is finally back out. We are downtown Parker. Let's walk over to the farmer's market. That's one of the first churches in Parker. And here's some of the stalls. I'm excited to see what they have today. It's a busy day today. Let's go see what the dogs are doing. I do check out the dogs at farmers markets. Here's a guy that we met. This handsome young gentleman is named Stanley, and he is a French bulldog. I had to stop his owner and ask if I could take his picture because he was just too adorable. And her name is Adrian. She turned out to be so friendly, and I sent her these pictures. She loved them. He's a really sweet French bulldog. So Stanley made our morning. And then I want to show you all of these tomato plants. Oh my gosh, that booth was filled with tomato plants, and it had a few basil plants at the end. Varieties I've never seen before. That's one thing I really love about going to farmers markets is you find vegetables that are familiar and some that are unfamiliar. These beautiful vegetables are from a farm in Brighton called Palazzi Farm. I did buy some poblano peppers from them, but look at those bell peppers. Oh my gosh. And the watermelon, oh, it smelled so good. So we're going to have watermelon and poblano peppers and some Wagyu beef for dinner. I'm so excited. The pansies were in bloom. Our town puts out pansies in the flower pots down the center of Main Street, and they're just so cheerful and happy, and I do love their color of purple, so I thought I would take pictures of the pansies to share with you. And then there was another booth there that had some geraniums, and they were just so vibrant in their colors. I love geraniums. I have a good history with them. I have a few plants that I don't kill. But nowadays the deer eat them all, so I'm pretty much destined to photos. But here we went to two different ranch booths and we got some ground beef. We got that watermelon and the poblano peppers. One of the ranches is Antelope Creek Ranch there to the north of us in Wiggins, Colorado. And then the other ranch is Snow Creek Ranch, which is in Larkspur, just a skip down the road from us. Of all of the pictures, though, I think this one might be a fun one for us to paint today, and I will put a link to it in the description below. All you have to do is click on more, and that will expand the description, and then you can scroll down to the reference photo, and the link should take you to my Dropbox. If for any reason you can't open those photos, let me know. But there was a problem earlier, but I think I've got it all fixed, so you should be able to access those reference photos. Now, at first, I thought I was going to tape off the edge here and make it all nice and neat, and then I decided, you know what? No, I think I want to go with an organic background kind of a situation. The paints that I'm using are the Mungyo Gallery paints. They've got such a nice color array. There are 48 colors in here, which frankly is more than anyone needs, but I should talk, right? You all know that I've got a ton of art supplies, but I do collect them, so there's that. Anyway, we are just going to start by drawing. Now, the paper that I'm using, unfortunately, this particular pad is no longer available, but I would recommend using cold press watercolor paper if you're going to paint along with me. Any sheet, any brand is fine. I'm just kind of blocking in the shapes. When you are drawing, now you can trace this. That's totally fine. If you want to trace this, no tracing police is going to come and talk to you. That just doesn't happen. It's still completely valid. It's still your artwork. I enjoy drawing, so I'm making that a part of this process. If you don't enjoy drawing, then find some other way to get it on your paper. Either trace it or make a grid to reference from, however you want to do it. I'm just kind of blocking in the shapes and filling in what I kind of like as a composition. I've changed around a couple of the pansies from the way that they're facing in the photo, but some of them I really like the way that the leaves are bent, and I kind of want to accentuate that. So what I'm going to try to do is just to make this a little bit darker so that you can see it. So in this upper left one here, I'm just kind of outlining where I want that first leaf that's kind of coming toward us to be. And then I'm putting in a little area there to remind myself the direction that it's shaped and maybe how I'm going to shade it. Now, many of you know I'm not a realistic painter. This painting is going to be very loose, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. We're going to end up finishing it with some colored pencil and some ink. So it's just going to be a fun, illustrative, that's a word that's hard for me to say sometimes, a fun, illustrative memory of me, or for me rather, and my day at the farmer's market. And that's what I would hope that painting can do for you as well. Any kind of art that you make, anything you create, make it fun. Don't sweat over it. Nothing has to be perfect. It's just the act of creating is the one thing I want you to take away from my channel, is that if you can just sit down and create something, anything, it doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to be perfect, just go with it, and you will end up in a lighter mood, and you might learn something in the process. So what I'm doing here is just kind of following the basic shapes of the pansies, kind of trying to get where I want, again, some of the shadows and folds to be. Just putting in a suggestion of stem and leaves here. I don't know if I'm going to keep that there, but I might. And we'll just continue on through the drawing and kind of try and get the different shapes of the pansies. I really like that this particular shot of the pansies showed the many different directions that they face and how their petals can kind of fold over one another. Whenever you're drawing something that is so familiar, I mean, a pansy is a pretty common flower, our temptation is to draw it straight on. And that, of course, is what makes us love that flower, because we know how it looks at us. It's got that cheerful little face that's staring right at us. But if you look at this photo, some of these flowers are really facing just about in every direction, and some of them aren't even fully bloomed out yet. And I really felt like if you're going to draw something that's so familiar, I thought this would be such a good example for you all, because you can see different ways, different perspectives that pansy would look all in one photo. And you wouldn't have to compile a bunch of different photos to get the different angles. Now, some of the time I may have moved some leaves and rearranged some things, and I know what I'm going to do is not end up with any white pansies because of the way that I started this, and that's fine. You can dive in with both feet and change around what you're doing. There are no rules. You can do whatever you want. So now, just looking at the pencil drawing here, you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pansies, and that little one up top is kind of facing away from us. And now I'll give this guy a stem here, and then we'll go ahead and finish the other two. Let's just skip ahead to the end of the drawing. And if you need to pause this at any time, you sure can, just to kind of catch up with where I'm at. It's a little bit challenging to kind of tell from my drawing where the pansies are, but if you can look at the little centers of each one, I kind of tried to really make those centers a little bit darker so that you all could tell where I'm drawing and what I'm thinking when I'm putting this on paper, because I know that it's not an exact rendering. Like I said, take the image that I've given you and do whatever you want with it. But we've got 3 pansies across the bottom there, and then 3 in back, and the 3 in back are just a little bit smaller. So it does make kind of a nice, pleasing arrangement, even though it's an even number. Typically when you arrange things, you're going to want them in an odd number, but this particular arrangement forms kind of an oval or a trapezoidal shape, so it is more pleasing to the eye. And that's one thing you want to pay attention to, is your composition. Don't sweat it, don't worry about it, but if it looks like you've got a big blank spot in your paper, maybe fill that in with something. Now, I know that is greatly oversimplified as far as composition goes, but that's kind of a separate lesson in and of itself. What I just want you to look for in your drawing when you're starting any painting at all is for balance. And if you do have that big gap of something that looks like something should be there, if you're not using it as part of the statement of your work, maybe put something in that space. So I'm starting out by just getting everything wet, and I did spray my paints there, and I accidentally sprayed my paper. So I went ahead and I put a little bit more water on the paper anyway, because you know where I live, Colorado. We are always so dry here. So I wanted to go ahead and get that paper just a little bit extra wet. And then I've got a very short little ceramic palette there that I've just braced up under it, because I just want to have it have a little bit of gravity going for it. You can use a roll of tape, you can use anything, and a couple of erasers, just something to give you a little bit of an angle. Or you can work off an easel. I just am not accustomed to working that way, so I typically don't. The brush that I'm using is a Princeton Snap 3/4 inch stroke. It is what I recommend for all my beginning watercolor students. The Princeton Snap line is very friendly. They're very durable. The nylon filaments are they're good for helping you control the amount of water that you have on your brush. Sometimes if you go right straight into a professional watercolor brush that is like a faux squirrel or a I don't know, a real squirrel hair or a Kolinsky sable, something like that, then the water might just be too fast and too slippery for you. So if you're beginning watercolorist, I recommend these Princeton Snap brushes. And you can see what I've done here is just tap in some yellow, and then I've gone in with some different shades of purple and ultramarine blue, and I'm using that ultramarine blue to mix with the lemon yellow to create a green. So this will be the background. The way to think about creating a watercolor painting when you're doing wet on wet and creating this kind of a method like this is to think of it as a photo that you're bringing into focus. Now, again, I'm not a realistic painter, so my focus, quote unquote, may not be as sharp and clear as you would do. But when you're working on filling in the background like this is a real simple way to just kind of block in your color. It's the way a lot of painters like to start, no matter what the medium is. But with watercolor, I really like doing it this way because it's so soft and you can really have a lot of fun with it and not worry about placement too much, because since it is so soft and so subtle, what you paint over it, especially if you do wet on dry, you'll be able to make it really crisp and clean. And if something doesn't end up quite where you want it, it's not going to be a big deal. I'm just going in with some more of that purple there, and I am doing some splatters, and I think I'm going to do some splatters with the ultramarine too. Now, I was being lazy here. Splattering with a stroke brush is not the easiest thing in the world. You can see I had a little bit of struggle getting the splatters out, but if you make the paint loose enough and get enough on there, then you'll be able to get it done. By making paint loose, what that means is to add some more water to it. So you have a thinner, I should say, to make it thinner, to make a thinner liquid in your palette there. So you can see up top I've got lemon yellow mixed with ultramarine blue, and then I've got that purple, and then next to it is an ultramarine. The purple that I'm using in that particular set is just called purple. There's a darker purple in this set that's a permanent violet. If you have a set that has some professional paints in it, you might want to go with cobalt purple. That would be lovely. It would give you a lot of texture, and it's a nice subtle purple. Or you could even go in with a quinacridone rose and mix that with your ultramarine, because ultramarine has a lot of texture in it as well. So you'll be able to have some fun watching those paints play on your artwork there, on your watercolor paper. So I'm looking for the rest of my brushes here, and I'm just going to get this dry. I just want to point out, you'll notice that I used a pair of tweezers there for just a second. I had an eraser crumb on there. I recommend having a little pair of tweezers near you, because sometimes if you get something on your painting that you don't want, you don't want to reach in with your fingers to take it out, because you can leave some blobs and smudges that you didn't intend on having. Now let's go ahead and decide what yellow to use for the centers of the flowers, because that's where I want to start. I want to mark those centers so that I have a good anchor point. And that's another good step to remember, that once you get something like this, where we're at now, and you've got your background down, it can look a little confusing to the eye. So get your anchor points situated. I'm going through and I'm referencing the photo as I'm painting, just to make sure that I'm getting them in the right spot. And the yellow that I've chosen to use for this particular one is a yellow orange. It's more intense than the lemon yellow, and it will look very nice with the purple. Purple and yellow are opposites on the color wheel, so they'll have a good amount of contrast and energy, which is why I wanted to start with that lemon yellow in the background. But the yellow orange is going to be great color for the center for us there. Now I'm just going to go ahead and use their purple. And again, you could use a cobalt violet or imperial purple, anything like that. Kind of any purple you have that kind of lends red. That's what we're doing here with this. And the brush that I'm using is a Princeton Snap. I'm using a number 4. This particular set, I have the one that I recommend for my beginner students. It comes with a 6 round, a 4 round, and that 3/4 inch stroke. So I really like that this purple is a little bit reddish. It'll be a little bit a little bit paler, not quite as intense, that's a better word, as the purple that has a blue base to it. You'll be able to kind of see a little bit better to start with this, and then I'm mixing the ultramarine with it to blue it up where I need to. So right now I'm working on two separate flowers. You can see the centers where I put them, and then now I'm working on adding some blue to get some shadows going. Whenever you add blue to something like this, it's going to take that area back just a little bit. It's going to make it indent or go behind. Anything that you make the paint thicker or more intense color, that's going to help to bring that back behind. So that's what I'm establishing here. I want to give the ends of the petals, the rims of them, just a little bit more oomph than the parts in the center for now. So I'm putting the pigment around the edge, and then I'm pulling that down with water so that I can drop more pigment in. And this is where that really gets fun. So that petal surface there is wet. I've gone into that other purple, which is permanent violet on this particular palette, and I've got a new pile of it there in the palette. You can see in a different well. And now you can just, when that petal is wet, the entire surface is wet, you can drop that darker purple in, put it close to the center, and just let it migrate. Just let it do its thing. And that will really help you have a more organic look to what it is you're going for. So see, there you go. We've got our first pansy almost finished. I'm going to repeat those steps throughout, and you can see I've done that with the pansy on the left, keeping the color just a little bit paler. Now this particular petal that I'm working on, in the photo, it is a white petal, but I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm just going to make it a cool blue and add some purples in later. And the reason I'm doing that is because I wanted to leave the background intact. You could have put down masking fluid, you could go in and lift it out, you could go in with gouache if you want to. But wherever you see white in the reference photo, I'm going in with a blue. I just wanted to change it, make it a little more moody, a little more expressive. So you can use whichever color you want. You could have made these pansies a different color entirely. It's completely up to you. So you can see when I painted that blue up there, then I went in and lifted it out because I got too much pigment down. So that's something else you can remember is whenever you're working with watercolor pigment, if you don't like what you've done, just have a paper towel and lift it right out. Now this next pansy on the right is very interesting because it's pointing directly right from us. It's really not pointing at us at all. So that petal on the left, this one just to the left of this petal that I'm working on, is kind of pointing straight at us. So we're looking at it from a totally different plane. So we're just going to keep it very narrow. That's the other key I have for you when you're looking at these different shapes and shadows. You could look at this photo, our reference photo, and say, oh my gosh, it's just a lot of flowers, and your eyes will get confused. Well, try to break it down. Try to look at each petal and see what is the shape. You can see they're kind of soft diamonds. And then you can see which way is that shape facing. And imagine that shape, that diamond shape, a plane, turning in space. And you can also practice by picking up a piece of paper, and if you hold it flat on, it's going to be a rectangle, but as you turn it, that rectangle will get narrower and narrower. So that's something I want you to pay attention when you are painting and drawing this, is to keep your darks in the areas that are most recessed on the pansies themselves. So that way, when you're looking at your finished painting, it will appear as though that area is deeper and takes up space in a different way than the edges of the petals do that are closer to you. Now let's go back to that petal up there in the center, the flower in the center that's kind of small and pointing away from us. I've got that area dry, and now I'm going in wet on dry, and I'm just adding little bits of pigment where I think it will look nice to pull a concentrate from. So you can see there I have rinsed off my brush, dabbed it on the paper towel, and now I am just kind of using it to agitate that pigment. And then that little petal down there caught my eye where it needed a little bit of shadow. Some of these petals, you'll notice, have creases in them. Wherever you see a crease or a dip, that's a good place for you to put down a little bit more paint. So if we go right along that edge there, for example, when I am done painting and when I have the ink on, when it's all done after the colored pencil, you'll see how I'm able to make that petal there look like it's kind of folded under. So we're just continuing to fill in these shapes, Same technique over and over and over again, adding the pigment down, getting the area wet, pulling it around, adding those shadows, getting them wet, and pulling them down into the areas where we want to accentuate all of that depth of field. Now I feel like I've got the shadows laid down pretty much the way I want them to. Now I'm going to go in and accentuate some of these folds. You see that dark line that I just pulled down, and now I'm pulling from it. What that will represent is a little bit of a shadow because the pansy next to it is kind of folded over. So I'm just trying to get the suggestion of the little shadows and veins in here. I'm using a very light touch, trying to get this brush to lay down as narrow a line as possible. You can definitely choose a different brush. I do get lazy, and I end up using the same brush throughout on a lot of them, but in a way I kind of feel like that's nice because you don't need a whole lot of brushes. You can use just one brush and create a beautiful painting. So I'm working on these shadows just a little bit more up here to kind of try and give this pansy petal some shape, and I think you can see as I go through this, as soon as I lay down a darker line, that petal takes on a different shape. If you're painting this and you lay down a line and you don't like the way it looks, just take your paper towel and lift it right up. Creating dimension and shadow is really wonderfully fun in watercolor because you can lift it and do it again if it doesn't end up exactly the way you want it. So now I'm mixing some blue with some of that purple so that I can get some more defined shadow lines in here and kind of take those upper petals further away from our eyes. So let's go ahead and let's go into some of the yellow now. And I think we're going to mix it with some of that ultramarine blue because we need to get some of these leaves going. I ended up just pulling that lemon yellow down into my little pool there of ultramarine because I realized that I can create a lighter version of the green toward the top and then darken it up toward the bottom. I'm just putting in random suggestions of these pansy leaves. This isn't what pansy leaves really look like. It probably isn't even really the way the foliage grows, but that doesn't matter. All I'm doing is creating a suggestion that these plants have leaves, and I think it really works with the background. You can be a lot more detailed. You can take that photo and you can make yourself a botanical representation of these pansies, and it will come out beautifully. That's not what I was going for with this particular one. I was going for joy. And I think that with loose painting, I think that's one of the things that jumps out to me the most is the energy that you can create as an artist with all of this loose vibrancy just on paper. By taking the reference photo and making it your own, taking the best parts of it and interpreting it the way that is your language. For me, that's the way I like to teach art, and that is the way that I think that when you're learning something like watercolor, that can be very frustrating. I think learning to accept all of its quirks and tricks are one of the ways that you can get over some of those hurdles that will stop a lot of people with watercolor. Don't be afraid. If you don't like it, it's only paper. Do it again. If you get something on there you don't like I said, you can lift it off or you can add some splatters and hide it a little bit. There's so many ways that you can forgive yourself with watercolor. And right now this painting really does look very simple. But let's go ahead and add some colored pencil and then we'll add some ink to it. And I think you'll see that we can get really kind of a cute little painting out of this. Since this is staying in my sketchbook, I don't have to worry about light fastness. So the paints I'm using, I don't think they're light fast at all. They do have a rating, but I don't know. They might be, they might not. I'm not worried about it. The colored pencils that I'm using are a dupe. They're a Polychromos dupe. I just got them through AliExpress. I'll link to it if you're interested. They're easy to use. They're soft. They don't crumble too much. I really do enjoy them. I feel like it was money well spent. They are trying to look like Polychromos, but they are not. They are definitely not, and I didn't think I was buying Polychromos when I got these. So, you know, they're definitely worth what I paid for them. Let's put it that way. Just using any kind of supplies in your sketchbook, this is what sketchbooks are for. This is what you should be doing. You should be trying new techniques, trying new experiments. You could go over this with crayon. You could go over it with pastel. You could go over it with Neocolor 2, the water-soluble pastel. There's so much fun you can have with this. This is just a multimedia experiment in fun. And let's see, I used about 6 different colored pencils. I have a couple of blues, a light and a dark, and I have a lighter and a darker reddish purple. I've got a true blue purple, and then 2 greens. One is light and one is dark. You can use any brand of colored pencils. It just doesn't matter. If you're working in your sketchbook, all you're doing is having fun. If you need to go in your child's room and borrow some of their school supplies for a minute, go ahead. It's all about you having fun and not breaking the bank. So don't look at what you see on my desk or what I talk about in my videos and think, oh my gosh, I have to go out and buy those things. No art supply is going to make you have more fun. No art supply is going to make you a better artist. The only thing that will enhance those is practice and doing things like this exercise over and over and over again. Do something every day. Be creative every single day, and then you'll be able to achieve the results you want to in the long run. It's not about the end result. It is truly about the journey. And speaking of that journey, we often think we are at journey's end, and we are not. And if you've watched me before, if you know my channel, you'll know that I often go back and I tweak. And that's what happened here. This is when I decided to add the ink because it really just felt to me like it needed some more definition. I love the softness of the edges. I really like what I was able to do with all of it, but I felt like, it's just not quite finished. So I thought it would be nice to go back in with a fountain pen. Now I'm just using my favorite fountain pen. It used to be my mom's. You can use whatever pen you want, but I thought a black ink would look really nice with this. And at this point, you don't have to worry about the ink being water soluble. I did run into, though, which I knew I would, the colored pencils are wax base, and the ink kind of just didn't go over it, and I had to kind of coax it a little bit for some of it. But if you're using any kind of a pigment liner, you'll probably run into that. So just be aware that it might have an effect on the tip of your fine liner. Also using highly textured watercolor paper is going to have an effect. What I'm trying to do is to follow the edges and lines of what I've got going with the shading. It may or may not be the way that you intended it in the beginning. Keep that in mind when you've got your painting done. This is where I like to be as free as possible, is with the ink at the end. I'm kind of just following the shades and contours that are naturally there with the paint that I laid down. When you do that, when you try and enhance what's already there, you end up with a better result. If you're trying to correct something at this point, I would say it might be too late. You might be able to do it, but I always feel like at this point in the drawing, I'm going to go with what's there, what I naturally see with my eye, and just be really free with this kind of outlining. I'm not outlining very accurately. I'm just kind of letting some space occur. And for me personally, I think that creates a really kind of a neat feel. So you can see what I'm kind of doing is going around the center of these pansies first, and then coming in and following the lines where the pigment changes in value. I'm trying to follow those light-dark moments where the light meets the dark and vice versa, because those will ultimately turn out to be the natural folds and shapes in the pansies petals. Because what your eye is going to see is it's going to see this as an outline, even though it's not truly a spot-on outline. It will help to guide your eye to see those natural contours in the paint color. So backing up then, when you are painting it, you want to make sure that you do pay attention to where you're putting your contours. And you can be free with it. You can see one of the leaves I added there was not even a leaf in the first part, in the first place. I went ahead and just added one in. So you can add some elements to this that are just drawn with pen. If you wanted to, you could draw in some more pansies and just have them be ink without being filled in at all. That would give this a really nice texture and a fun look to it. So I'm just going around these leaves down here now, and that's when I kind of noticed that my pen was complaining about the wax colored pencil on the paper. But I'm almost done here, and there was no harm done to my pen. And there you have it. Here is my final version of a whimsical, loose representation of the pansies that I saw at the Parker Farmers Market today. I hope that wherever you are, you get a chance to enjoy a farmer's market. I kind of believe that those are the people that keep the backbone of our community strong, and it's so fun to get out and be amongst your neighbors and maybe meet a new dog or two. Take care, you guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye now.